So clearly, the Unearthed Arcana Barbarian and Monk is very divided. If you just go and look at the link in the description below to the video that I did on that, the feedback and the comments are exceptionally polarized. That being said, I'm going to do my best to do what I think needs to be done to balance those classes, or at least my stab at it. And if you're curious to see how I would balance them, stay tuned. So let's jump in. We're back here looking at the document. And I've gone through and I've thought about this a lot, and I've polled some of my friends who do a lot of homebrew stuff like myself to see what people think would be the best way to balance things out. So here's my thoughts. The Barbarian has the spell slot thing is the big one, right? So what would I do? So looking at the, I'm fine. I like the detect magic thing based on Constitution and the glowing thing. I think that's really cool. The Wild Surge. So the only one that really kind of jumps out at me at being super, whether it needs balancing or not, is the first one. And the only reason why I say that is because it's a D10 necrotic damage, no save, and you get hit points equal to the sum of necrotic damage dealt to all creatures. So the way I can see that potentially being an issue is, right, so say a creature has 5 hit points and you roll a 10. Technically, that creature takes 10 points of damage. Even though they only had 5 hit points, they took 10 points of damage. Therefore, you get 10 temporary hit points for defeating that creature. So I guess part of the issue that I have with it is a lot of spells and abilities that have things like this, like the Vampiric Touch spell or the Enervation spell, spells that deal necrotic damage and then also heal you. The way they typically work is whenever you deal damage, you get half of the damage dealt back in hit points, or in this case, in temporary hit points. So I think that would probably be the easiest and cleanest way to fix it. You deal damage to each creature within 30 feet, takes D10 necrotic damage, and you gain temporary hit points equal to the sum of half the necrotic damage that you dealt. So I think that that's pretty good. I think this is also balanced in that it does harm your party. So it will damage your allies as well as your enemies. But if you've traveled through any of the convoluted forums or the discussions of Dungeons and Dragons where people talk, especially, it's rampant in older editions, but it does exist in 5th edition to some extent, you'll run into like the idea of the Jar of Bees for Hex or the Coffee Warlock or things like that. And the thought process being is you keep a bunch of really low hit point. This is not necessarily tied to those, but for this one, right? Why I could see people saying, and I'm sure it probably exists somewhere, I'll carry around a jar of ants, like a mason jar full of ants, and I'll have my party members get more than 30 feet away, and I've probably got 100 ants in this jar, and I'll roll on my table, and I'll see what I do, right? If I roll a 1, and I kill 100 ants, that's 100 points of total necrotic damage, so I'm going to get 100 temporary hit points. Again, yes, 100% crazy, but it's worded. I mean, if you have a DM that is 100% rules as written, and I feel like most people are going to be like, I'm not going to allow you to do that. But as it's written, you deal damage to all creatures. Ants are creatures. They have 1 hit point. You will get the hit points from the damage you deal to them. Not advocating that by any means, but it's a potential thing you could encounter, right? If you're in a city, you could be doing this to a whole bunch of commoners in the city, their cats, their dogs, the poultry, whatever the case may be. It's just things to think about. So that's the only one I think that really jumps out at me as being a little maybe needing balance. Alternatively, if you didn't want to do the sum of half of the damage dealt, you could make this have a save, maybe a dexterity saving throw, and if they succeed, then it deals half damage, because there are a couple that do something similar, but they also have a save, right? So this one with the intangible spirits of the flumps that go out and explode, that was a dex save or take 2d8 force damage. That was dex save for 2d8 force damage. If they succeed, they take no damage. So you could mitigate it that way, but I do think that just making it half does the least amount of alterations to it. Still feels strong, but is more in line with other, necrotic, vampiric style abilities. I don't really think anything else is too in need of balance in my mind. So I'm really okay with pretty much everything else. So the one, again, that a lot of people have issues with, myself included, is the magic reserves. And the reason why is it basically does have the ability to turn your barbarian into a spell battery to just fully charge up any of your allies with spellcasting. And we could talk, like I said, check out that video, check out the comments in that video for how you can really use this to just supercharge people. So here's how I would fix it. And I like the idea of it. And I should say this if I didn't say it in the other video. I like the idea and the concept of both of these classes. I just think they need a little alteration to really make them balanced in a 5th edition mindset. So what I would do is I would keep basically everything that's here, just add in a little bit. 1, I would make where it says the force damage, you take force damage equal to 5 times the number rolled. That's fine, but add the caveat that this damage cannot be reduced in any fashion. Anything where you kind of can take damage for someone else or share damage and things like that, you taking on damage to provide someone else a benefit. I know there's a bunch of paladin auras and things like that that have things like this. When you take that damage, they specifically state this damage cannot be reduced in any fashion. And I think that that's simple, right? Force damage is not something that comes up too often, but there are means to reduce force damage. So if you had, like I said in that previous video, a brooch of shielding or a ring of force resistance, you just cut half of the downside to this in half. And I mean, you're a barbarian, you have a decent hit point pool typically. And so at level 6, the most damage you would take if you rolled a 4 on it would be 20 points of damage, but you could, with that ring or one of those items, reduce that down to 10 points of damage. So that kind of really cuts the teeth of the penalty. So it can't be reduced in any fashion. And then the only other caveat I would say is if you have recovered a spell slot or gain temporary hit points from this feature, you cannot do so again until you complete a short or long rest. That limits it. You can't just sit there and fully go through a combat and then just supercharge back up all your spellcasters to move on. If you think that that's too much, you could just change it to you can only regain regain spell slots or hit points from this feature once per long rest. I'm saying short or long rest. I feel like that still lets you do it enough that it feels good and it's a good 6th level ability for your barbarian, but it's still limited. You still take the damage can't be reduced, and you can't just do it a crazy amount of times. So that's how I would alter that one. Arcane Rebuke, I have no issues with. I think that that's a really good idea. Barbarians don't have a ton of reaction utility. There's where reality came from. So I'm fine with that. And then Chaotic Fury. So the only thing, and this may be fine as it is. So the only potential thought I had to possibly change this is to make it more in line with the Wild Magic Surge of the Wild Magic Surge Sorcerer, or the Wild Magic Sorcerer. Which here, they get to the wild. I guess part of it is Wild Magic Surge just happens whenever it's decided that it happens, and then it's one off and then it's gone. For this, I would say if you want to follow that same mentality, since they're sort of a similar thing, the Wild Magic Sorcerer gets to roll the die twice and then choose which one. This one here lets you re-roll it every single turn while you're raging as a bonus action. So you could be using, and I mean, you don't have a ton of utility for your bonus action. In this base barbarian, you have other means of using your bonus action, outside of this with items and other features you may have. But this just lets you, continually roll in the hopes to try to grab something that you want. So if I was going to alter this at all, which I'm still not convinced it needs to be, but my thing would be when you roll on the Wild Surge table, you can roll twice and choose the number. So you would remove this ability to do it every turn as a bonus action. So this only activates when you rage. So you activate your rage and then roll 2d8 and then choose the option you want. And then you wouldn't have to use that ability again until you rage another time in the future. So that's how I would tweak that if I was going to make any alterations to that. So let's jump over to the Way of Astral Self Monk. I've discussed my issues with that, again, I'd say pretty ad nauseum in the other video. So here's how I would change it to make it, I feel like, a little more balanced. So part of my issue that I have with the Arms of Astral Self is eventually, now it doesn't start that way, but at level 11, where you can make 2 bonus action attacks, 2 attacks as a bonus action using your arms, is it essentially, in my mind, it will negate your need, like the whole Flurry of Blows feature is negated. And the reason I say that is when you take the attack action as a monk of level 3 and beyond, you can spend 1 key point around to, as a bonus action, do 2 attacks with Flurry of Blows, and those have to be unarmed strikes. This feature here, your arms, which not only have a 10-foot reach and can do radiant or necrotic damage, when you hit 11, when you take the attack action, after that as a bonus action, you can do 2 attacks, so therefore the same amount of attacks that Flurry of Blows would have. However, rather than having to spend 1 key point every turn, using up your resource, making it a decision call that you have to make, you spend 2 key points as a bonus action at the start, and this lasts for 10 minutes. So you have this through the entire length of your combat. So this is something that I like, and I've gone over this with a bunch of other subclasses in the past on Unearthed Arcana reviews and things like that. I really think it shines when a subclass really has good synergy within itself and synergy within the base class. This, and depending on how it's used, and at a certain point, level 11 specifically, you're negating and basically invalidating one of the core functions of the class. If you were to have this monk alongside another monk at level 11, and I mean, think about it this way too. That's another reason I would talk about the balance. Think about it this way. If we're playing the game together with the exact same stats in every way, and I'm playing the Astral Self Monk and you're playing a different monk, and every turn we get into combat, I can do more cool things and do the things that you would be doing with using half the amount of resources, doing more damage at more range, and being more consistent in doing so, that's not going to feel good for you, because you're just going to be like, man, I should have picked that subclass too. He's so much better than I am, and he can do everything that I'm trying to do, but better and more frequently. And that's where I'm looking at the balance from this. You want everybody to feel like they're having fun at the table. If one subclass really outshines the other, or one subclass is really poor in comparison, then things seem unbalanced. And if 2 people played the same thing at the table, or played those same classes but different subclasses at the table, someone's going to feel left out. So first of all, what I would do is I would cut the duration of Astral Self down to 1 minute. There are really no features that I can think of off the top of my head, and I could be wrong, but no major combat-oriented features that are out there that last for 10 minutes time. I guess Spirit Guardian's the spell, but that is a resource that you expend as a cleric that you do not get back until you take a long rest, unless you have some sort of magic item or homebrew thing. And that is a concentration effect as well. So if you are hit, you can lose that. This ability is non-concentration, and it lasts for 10 minutes. I think if you cut it back to a minute, that does a lot to reduce things. So I mean, that's not a huge change, but I would reduce that back. I would increase the key point expenditure here. At 3rd level, I would say that when you get this, that this is 3 key points. This is your big gun that you have now. Previously, you could have been doing Flurry of Blows at level 2 to get 3 attacks in a turn. Now you're at this point where you can basically do the same thing, but now you can do it at range. You can change the damage type to something that's highly unresisted, like radiant damage. And eventually this will outclass your Flurry of Blows completely. So starting at level 3, make this your big gun. This is going to blow all your key points, which you do still get back on a short rest, but this is going to blow all of them. And this makes it a little bit more of an investment, again, where Flurry of Blows was 1 key point every round, and this was 2 key points to go for, forever, basically 100 rounds, which would never be a combat you'd actually do. But if we make it a minute, that's 10 rounds. That's you can, and I have played in combats that have lasted more than 10 rounds. So that's not a huge tweak, but I'm still leaving the extra attacks that are there, because I'm also looking at another thing that I decided to look at was Sun Soul Monk. It has a similar feature where you get new combat options for expenditures of key points. So a Sun Soul Monk can hurl bolts of radiant energy, doing radiant damage, that scales with your monk damage die, your unarmed strike die. But that is out to a range of 30 feet, and that's just something they can do every turn. Right? They can just do that instead of punching. And then if they so choose, as a bonus action, they can spend 1 key point to throw 2 additional bolts. So they have basically a means to replicate Flurry of Blows, but still doing with the ranged attacks, which is why they have it set up that way. This, again, eventually will invalidate and then surpass at 17 Flurry of Blows completely. So my very small tweak, cut it down to a minute, make the key point expenditure go up to 3. At level 6, you get the Visage of the Astral Self, which doesn't do a whole lot, right? This is a more of a role play scenario. Your ability to see in magical and non-magical darkness to a distance of 120 feet. So previously, the only character really that could see, there's a couple that could see in magical darkness. I think it's the Shadow Sorcerer, only if it's darkness that you create, and the Warlock. I mean, honestly, if it was just dark vision out to 120 feet, that would be pretty good. I'm going to leave it alone, though. I'm not going to mess with that. And the advantage on insight and intimidation checks, that's fine. Mimicking up here, we're going to cut this duration down to 1 minute's time. And we're going to increase this key point expenditure to be 3, matching this. So at level 6, if you want to activate both, it's 6 key points. That means, again, at level 6, you want to do both, you are expending all of your key points. And that's more or less for the next feature. So at 11, while you have both summoned, which at 11 would cost you, based on that, 6 key points, you also have Deflect Energy. When one of your arms hits your target, you can deal an extra damage die, and then you have this, booming speech or, mind speech thing. So the reason why I do that is now you have this extra damage die on here. Your attacks are now doing a D8. You can deflect, and all this stuff. But basically, at this point, if it costs 6 key points, you can't do more than 2 per short rest. And I like that. I think that that's pretty good. That means it's a balanced thing. You're going to have to make a serious expenditure if you want to get all the benefits. You have to choose 6 key points. So I'm going to use this now as an active decision, and it reduces, excuse me, it reduces the frequency at which you could do it. Because again, previously, as it's written here, it was 3 key points. So you could do this 3 times per short rest, and it would last for 30 minutes grand total before that. Now it will be a total of 3 minutes, and you can only do it once per short rest. Then next up comes the Complete Astral Self, and I'm okay with it being 10 key points to get all of the benefits, because now we're higher level, and it's actually a little bit of savings, right? So previously, this would have been 7 more key points than you would have needed to use before. Now it's only 4 more to get this last benefit, and I think that that's okay. We've kind of scaled with the 3, 3, and now 4. I think that works out well. I did see some suggestions like to make this, you want to make this really good, it's all of your key points. You spend all 17 at level 17, and then you get this ability. I'm okay with it keeping it at 10, but I will have a couple tweaks. Again, same thing, we're going to reduce it down to a minute's time. And then what I would do here, so you get a +2 to AC. You get this whenever you use the extra attack feature to attack twice. You can instead attack 3 times. And when you defeat a creature, oh, well, when a creature within 10 feet of you is reduced to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to regain key points equal to your wisdom modifier. So I do feel like the +2 AC is a little, I mean, I get it, you're getting like a suit of armor around you. I do feel like this has largely been an offensive-based ability throughout the whole time, but I'm okay with it because you have to deflect energy. I'm fine, keep the +2 AC. No issues there. Astral Barrage, lose it. Completely lose it. You get a +2 to your AC. You get all the other benefits you already had for a decent amount. You're getting a bonus to your AC, and then I think you're going to get this as well. When a creature within 10 feet of you is reduced to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to regain key points equal to your wisdom modifier. That's pretty good. My only potential tweak to this, and I'm not sure, is when a creature you defeat with your astral arms is reduced to 0 hit points. Because currently, if a creature dies, any creature dies, whether it's your party members or if your party member kills someone and they're within 10 feet of you, you can get the key points back from it. I feel like this should be the way things are designed. I feel like it should be something that you take out, you get the benefit from, not just something dies in your presence and then you can consume the key from it. I'm not sure on that. You could probably leave it. And then I think it's, it's a pretty decent thing. You've got all the other monk stuff you already have by the time you're level 17. You're doing a D10, proficiency in all saving throws, immunity to poison disease. You have all these other huge benefits going on. And now for 10 key points, so a little more than half of what you've got, you can get all the benefits you had, the radiant damage, 10-foot range, 3 attacks as a bonus action, 2 attacks as your main attack, extra damage die, reflecting of elemental damage, a bonus to your AC, and key point regen. I think that that's more than fine. Again, if you hit level 18, you could spend an additional 4 key points, so a total of 14 to 18 to get advantage on all attacks by becoming invisible, and resistance to all damage except force. Or as someone else had suggested, had you used it as it was, multi-class a couple levels in Fighter, and then you could action surge. With this, if you had them both up, that would be 6 attacks plus another 3 attacks, meaning 9 attacks in a round, which would be bananas. So that would be how I would change it. Reduce the duration of everything to a minute. 3 key points for arms, 3 key points for visage, and then complete astral self. Still 10 key points, 1 minute duration, and just lose astral barrage in the middle. And then I think that that's a decent way to still pretty much keep the benefits and the concepts for both classes entirely intact, not alter them drastically so that you still kind of get what the original design was going for, but to bring things a little bit more in line with the existing balance of 5e. Again, if you sat down at a table as a open hand monk and you played alongside an Arms of Astral Self monk, a lot of the things that you want to do by I'm going to hit him a couple times with Flurry of Blows, but I'm almost out of key points. And you're like, I spent 2 key points, and I've been doing basically the equivalency of that every round for a 2-point expenditure at the start. Not everybody's going to feel this way. Some people are like, hey, man, you do what you do, and that's fine. But, it's trying to keep everybody happy, trying to keep the balance in the existing, if you will, meta game that exists in D&D with all the existing classes and all the abilities they have, trying to bring the new stuff that's coming in line with that, so that everybody who sits down, whether they play a class that came out 5 years ago in the player's handbook or a brand new class that was released in Unearthed Arcana last week, they both have, they both feel in line with one another, and one doesn't clearly outclass one when they're trying to do the same thing. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think about my potential tweaks to these. Like I said, I wasn't going too over the top on what to balance. Just a few little things and clarifying that really kind of tightens things up a little bit. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you at the next one.